H. Hey, I'm back here with another video. Hello, how's it going? Oh my god. Anyway, yeah. Hello, I exist. Did you know that? I actually am an existent person. Hmm. Uh, figure it out. That would be good. After I get this building done, then we can start building there. Down there, and there, and there, and there. Oh my god, there's a 4-hour video. The most wholesome SCPs. Oh my god. 999 is my favorite kind SCP. He's so cute. I gotta get a plushie of him.
On the 13th of October, 1989, the town of Danner, Wisconsin was shaken by a seismic event unlike anything they'd ever experienced. This might have been written off as an earthquake, were it not for one disturbing factor. The ground-shaking event was accompanied by a huge spike of radioactivity, with the strange phenomenon happening a month before the Berlin Wall was torn down, during a period of the Cold War that historians call the Year of Crisis. It's easy to understand why the people of Danner immediately assumed the worst. But the huge eruption they felt wasn't the result of a nuclear bomb going off. The SCP Foundation was alerted to the event in Danner when they picked up a series of radio transmissions coming from just outside the town. When they arrived, they found something incredible, like something out of a sci-fi movie. Standing at the quake's epicenter was a creature that looked to be from another world. Standing 2 meters tall and weighing almost 300 kilograms, the being was green and brown in color, with a bulky humanoid body. Its head was a different story, though, and resembled a gigantic housefly with a proboscis and did not immediately go on a rampage. Instead, the being, designated SCP-2273, appeared to be exhausted, injured, and extremely malnourished. It offered no resistance at all to the Foundation containment team, and it was taken to Site-17 without conflict. While the SCP Foundation is no stranger to visitors from other worlds, there was something especially unusual about this supposed alien invader. The doctors who examined the creature and treated its injuries found an appendage that seemed to function as an organic radio transmitter, and large open wounds on its shoulder blades and forearms where further appendages had been ripped off. Additionally, while its insect-like exoskeleton was mostly a uniform green and brown pattern, the creature's upper arms and torso were dotted with a variety of scars and markings that, on closer inspection, looked like military badges. Was this some kind of wounded intergalactic soldier who had been stranded on Earth? If it was, then how were the organic badges on this alien's exoskeleton a near-perfect match to military badges worn by soldiers in the Soviet Union? Even if they did reference a unit that didn't officially exist within the Soviet army, the scientists were sure this alien wasn't an alien at all. Underneath its exoskeleton was a non-anomalous human being. If that was true, then this was even more terrifying than an extraterrestrial visitor. The scientists were sure that the USSR had developed a new kind of organic armor, and this anomaly showing up in Wisconsin was the result of a test on US soil that had gone wrong.
Weird.
If that
I mean,
was
that's
the
not,
case,
that's not,
then there was no telling
that's
how
pretty normal in the
many
SCP Foundation.
exoskeletons were out
If it
there
ain't weird, then it ain't an
to be
SCP.
contained. The Foundation had to act quickly and find out more. While SCP-2273 was recovering, they called in Dr. Friedrich, an on-site psychologist who could speak several languages including Russian. Dr. Friedrich would be tasked with interrogating the SCP on his origins and the nature of the suit. The interview was conducted via AM radio from a separate observation chamber, as the biological transmitter seemed to be SCP-2273's only method of communication. The interview began with Dr. Friedrich speaking to SCP-2273 in Russian, only for 2273 to respond that Dr. Friedrich's accent was atrocious and requesting he use German instead. SCP-2273, who, according to the organic military patches on his body, was named Major Alexei Belatrov, initially resisted being interviewed. He believed that he was a prisoner of war, being held by the American military. According to him, he had been in the middle of battle, and that the Americans had killed his men and left him for dead in the wilderness. Nothing that Dr. Friedrich told him, that there was no war, or that the Foundation was not affiliated with the U.S. government, could convince him otherwise, and he refused to talk further. Before a second interview was conducted, Belatrov was given an old copy of the Level 1 Researcher General Debrief as a way of helping him further understand the nature of the Foundation and his containment. Belatrov was more cooperative after that, though the realization that he would most likely be kept in containment for the rest of his life caused him great distress, and he was unwilling to speak to Dr. Friedrich for another 3 days. Dr. Friedrich didn't give up though, and when Belatrov finally opened up to the doctor, he began to tell him more and more. Belatrov told the doctor that when he was a child, Russia was hit by an American nuclear warhead, and that the Soviet
He's from an alternate universe.
the resulting nuclear conflict, which Belatrov called the War to End the World, caused massive devastation and left most of the planet dangerously irradiated. That is why allow him to survive above ground. Unfortunately, Belatrov knew very little about how the suit was made or how it worked, saying that it was built by the engineers and that it of several years. But Belatrov hadn't made the decision himself. It was his parents who had volunteered him as a test subject for the exoskeleton suit program when he was still young, hoping it would give him a better chance at survival. The process of bonding the exoskeleton to the human body was extremely painful, but according to Belatrov, its advantages far outweighed the pain. The suit not only helped him survive in a nuclear wasteland, but made him a better soldier. The suit allowed him to lift and carry up to 1,200 kilograms, gave him stereoscopic vision, and the organic radio transmitter allowed him to communicate with other soldiers across long distances, as well as listen in on encrypted enemy transmissions. The wounds on his shoulders and arms, where it looked like appendages had been ripped out, were where his weapons and supply packs had previously been mounted. Belatrov had been stationed with his men in the area he was discovered when they were attacked by American soldiers. The soldiers had ripped off Belatrov's weapons and supply pack, and did the same to all his men as well. They were all shot, with Belatrov being spared for the moment only because the Americans had identified him as the commanding officer. Suddenly, there was a bright flash of light, and the American soldiers vanished. Not only that, but the landscape changed. Where there had been a post-nuclear wasteland before, now there were lush green trees.
No, he's from another universe.
Belatrov began sending distress signals, only to have those signals intercepted by the SCP Foundation. The most interesting part of Belatrov's story, as far as the Foundation was concerned, came during his fourth interview, when Dr. Friedrich asked him about the engineers who had designed the exoskeleton suit. In Belatrov's own words, they weren't truly known to man until the years of the Great War and the Revolution. The French found them in buried cities where the Western Allies were digging their trenches. Eventually, they were made to build weapons for the war by both sides. By his description, these engineers didn't sound human, but they were by no means unknown to the SCP Foundation. Belatrov described the engineers as humanoid, nocturnal, covered in fur, and possessing technology and intelligence far beyond that of any human. Those familiar with the Foundation's history might already know the engineers by their Foundation designation of SCP-1000, or their more commonly known name,
Bigfoot.
Bigfoot. A quick rundown.
I know what
SCP-1000
SB-1000.
are a species of intelligent humanoid primates that lived alongside humanity in highly advanced cities until their own technology was turned against them. Not
New Clorox disinfecting mist. Aerosol-free and kills 99.9% of germs on hundreds of surfaces.
Germs on me? Ew!
God.
Not only were their cities wiped off the face of the earth, but 70% of their population was slaughtered, and the survivors were driven mad to the point that their mental faculties were no higher than those of a chimpanzee or gorilla. The SCP Foundation is tasked with keeping them away from human contact, in fear of what the creatures would be able to do to humanity if they ever regained their memories and full mental function, and rumors have been spread about them possessing deadly anomalous properties. But evidently, the destruction of the SCP-1000 species never occurred in Bellatrov's universe, or if it did, it wasn't nearly as complete. In that timeline, humanity regained contact with SCP-1000 after discovering their underground cities sometime during World War I. After this discovery, both Allied and Axis powers began recruiting them to build weapons, and their weapons played a role in both the Russian Revolution and the Second World War. It was because of these technological advantages that the Cold War escalated into what would become the war to end all wars. Both sides were armed with not only nuclear warheads, but highly advanced radiation-proof exoskeleton armor that allowed the conflict to continue even after the total destruction of the planet. While the humans fought above ground, life continued as normal for SCP-1000 in their underground cities. As Bellatrov noted, they never wore the armor themselves, as they had no need to venture above ground.
Only soldiers wear armor, and this is not their war.
Bellatrov continued to adjust to life in containment and sitting for regular interviews with Dr. Friedrich. He was given the rations provided for humanoid anomalies, but in quantities, as the suit required him to eat around 8,000. Bellatrov also began taking advantage of his ability to access the Foundation's library. He would often read or listen to classical music, particularly by the Russian composer Tchaikovsky. He seemed especially fond of reading The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. No surprise, given he was able to directly relate to the experience of living through an apocalypse and being transported to a strange timeline with no way to return home.
This guy seems interesting to talk to.
Bellatrov began to display symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder, reporting in his now regular interviews with Dr. Friedrich that he was constantly reliving memories of the battles he'd fought and the lives he had taken in combat. The suit was making the problems worse too, it seemed. It was as if he could never forget, as one of its features was an ability to store and replay memories. This feature was intended as a strategic aid that would allow commanding officers to more effectively gather and process information about their surroundings. But outside of combat, this only served to force Bellatrov into reliving his most painful memories again and again. Every night as he tried to sleep, he would see the faces of his men, their weapons torn from their exoskeletons, laying in the dirt after being gunned down by the enemy. Like many veterans, Bellatrov was being hit all at once with the harsh realities of war. Now that his brain wasn't solely focused on keeping him alive, it had time to process all the horrors he'd experienced. He told Dr. Friedrich,
I trained alongside these men for years before they put us back on the surface. Since we were all young children, we were brothers, and I gave them the order to surrender and got them killed. I should have died with them.
While the story of SCP-2273 ends here, the story of Alexei Bellatrov, SCP-2273-1 continues. In 2018, Bellatrov was allowed passage to Volgograd, Russia, as part of an anomaly reintegration program. While he was unable to secure employment within the Russian government as he had hoped, he eventually was taken in by a monastery and continued to write letters to Dr. Friedrich until Friedrich's eventual death from lymphoma-related complications. There's plenty more on the monastery, the anomaly reintegration program, and what happened to Major Bellatrov when he returned to Russia, but that will have to be a story for another day. The year was 1857, and the Second Opium War was raging between China and the
1867.
English and French. It was one of the many bloody colonial wars fought over resources like tea, sugar, and the intoxicating opium poppy. It was a war fought by peasants and noblemen alike. One of these aristocratic soldiers was the noble Lord Theodore Thomas Blackwood, the quintessential English gentleman and explorer. While his fellow soldiers cowered behind cover, Lord Blackwood charged into the fray, shouldering his rifle and firing his pistol into the crowd of opposing soldiers. It was the Battle of Canton, one of the most crucial battles of the entire conflict. The French and English were laying siege to the city of Canton, also known as Guangzhou, to prove their military dominance and capture an important Chinese government official. Lord Blackwood led the charge on horseback. Every bullet seemed to find the heart of a foe. He was a true hero among men, a gentleman warrior with class, refinement, and style. And it would be thanks to his expert leadership and marksmanship on the field that the Allied European forces won the battle decisively. Lord Theodore Thomas Blackwood is a name that deserves to be counted among Lord Horatio Nelson, Sir Francis Bacon, and Sir Walter Raleigh. In addition to being a skilled and honorable fighter, Lord Blackwood is a consummate explorer, naturalist, and frontiersman. During his heyday, he traveled perhaps further than any man across the known and unknown corners of the globe. He made scientific, biological, and anthropological discoveries that should have reset the course of society forever. Yet, you won't find any records in the history books of Lord Theodore Thomas Blackwood, nor will you find any grand oil paintings or dedicated wings in British museums. This is because Lord Theodore Thomas Blackwood is a 4.5-inch telepathic neon sea slug, and he's known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-67. While he would never admit to it,
What?
Lord Blackwood belongs to the species Nembrotha kubariana, also known as the variable neon slug. He's kept in a standard aquarium in a Foundation containment site, and is physically no different to any other member of his species. What makes Lord Blackwood unique is his powerful telepathic abilities, specifically, the power to communicate by speaking directly into people's minds. And what's more, he's extremely talkative. But to what extent is anything that this anomalous sea slug says true? Or is he just like SCP-082, Ferdinand the Cannibal, a creative and pathological liar? It isn't committed to record how exactly the Foundation discovered Lord Blackwood. Perhaps a local aquarium worker worried they were going insane when they heard the voice of a 19th century English nobleman ringing in their ears whenever they were cleaning algae out of the tank. Maybe Lord Blackwood was found by SCP Foundation divers, who are constantly combing the ocean for anomalous creatures and activity. What we do know is that Lord Blackwood is an incredibly strange and mysterious individual. He claims to have visited locations all around the world and encountered rare societies and creatures. The Foundation was skeptical about a number of Lord Blackwood's more outlandish claims, on account of him being a sea slug, but he does appear to have the knowledge to back up his supposed experience. Interviews with Lord Blackwood have shown that he's extremely knowledgeable in the areas of geography, zoology, botany, archaeology, anthropology, and linguistics relating to his claimed regions of exploration, as well as more esoteric fields such as obscure mythology, mysticism, and cryptozoology.
Taking the stage on karaoke night takes confidence. It's hard to feel confident when you apply for a credit card.
In other
God.
words, if Lord Blackwood hadn't gone on his escapades around the globe throughout history, how would he have come to possess this wide variety of information? The Foundation was getting frustrated, and began to probe further into the personal life of the most interesting gastropod in containment. Lord Blackwood, under questioning, was always polite and amicable with Foundation staff. He seemed to display no real knowledge of the fact that he himself was a sea slug, going as far to accuse other people of being crazy or drunk when they brought the fact up to him. While none of Lord Blackwood's tall tales ever extend past the year 1910, he told fanciful stories of exploring the Americas and of his involvement in the Second Opium War on the side of the English. Naturally, the Foundation wanted proof. When they pressured Lord Blackwood on this, something even stranger happened. He gave it. The Lord told his interviewers that he would happily donate his collection to them if it gave them cause to believe what he was saying. He gave the baffled Foundation researchers the address of a cottage in England where they could find the secrets to his bizarre and mysterious past, and local agents in the area followed up on the information. Upon investigation, Foundation field agents did indeed find the cottage that Lord Blackwood had specified. It was being maintained by an extremely old woman. When questioned about her presence there, she said that she was keeping the house for Lord Blackwood, and gave no more useful information. Incidentally, it appears that this singular purpose was all that this old woman was living.
Was he a human once or
She probably passed
something?
away from heart failure 5 days after the Foundation commandeered the cottage. Whether anything truly anomalous caused this, we still do not know. At first, the cottage seemed normal, until the field agents discovered a secret basement housing Lord Blackwood's collection. They were amazed at what they saw. The basement consisted of zoological and botanical specimens, over 3,000 artifacts, a library containing over 5,000 items, and a functioning 1800s scientific laboratory. It took about 3 weeks for Foundation agents working round the clock in shifts to remove all the items from Lord Blackwood's mysterious collection, and what they found raised even more questions. The collection included, but was no means limited to, 116 unknown species of plants, 107 unknown species of insects, 28 unknown species of lizards, 23 unknown species of fish, 14 unknown species of amphibians, 12 unknown species of mammals, fossils pertaining to 8 unknown species of dinosaur, fossils pertaining to 12 unknown species of prehistoric mammal, and artifacts belonging to 29 unknown indigenous societies.
Guys got it
That's
all.
a lot of unknowns. But wait, there's more. His collection also contained a collection of seemingly unknown firearms, including 3 wide-bore muskets marked as Dr. B.T. Mott's effective particle destabilizers, detailed globes of Mercury, Venus, Mars, and the Galilean moons, accompanied by notes detailing possible paths of surface exploration, a heavily modified carriage containing instruments of unknown purpose. A note attached to the door reads, "On the Freds, speak with Henry," and a highly dangerous and seemingly anomalous machine that killed 4 Foundation field agents before it was destroyed on site. And when questioned about this little fiasco, Lord Blackwood responded, "I did warn you to be careful around my collection. That bloody thing nearly took my head off back in '97 when I found it." However, there was one thing recovered from Lord Blackwood's collection that was perhaps more interesting than all the others. 35 handwritten journals containing recordings of events described by Lord Blackwood in his grandiose tall tales to the Foundation researchers. The accounts are generally identical to the stories he had told, save for some slight variations and exaggerations on the part of Blackwood in the retelling. Most interestingly of all of these journals have been dated to the appropriate time period of the events described by Foundation scientists. While his stories are too numerous to all be shared here,
Must have had have a human form, but why is he a slug?
account of a possible encounter with SCP-1000, also known as Bigfoot, in Seattle during the mid-1800s. Lord Blackwood, seeking to explore the so-called New World of North America, embarked with an assistant and an indigenous American guide to the Pacific Northwest in search of the legendary Sasquatch. The trio was headed for Mount Rainier, then known as Tahoma. During the journey, Lord Blackwood found a young fox caught in a trap that had been set by a local tribe. He took sympathy on the animal and freed it, allowing it to run away to safety. That night, he and his assistant met up with the rest of his guide's tribe, and they settled down for the evening. However, things took a disastrous turn when the camp was raided by a rival tribe. Almost everyone was slaughtered in the process, and Lord Blackwood and his 2 companions were hauled away by the enemy tribe for a sinister purpose: sacrifice to a violent local deity. As it turns out, the creature that this tribe worshipped was the very same one Lord Blackwood and the others were trying to find, a particularly large and aggressive Sasquatch. Each night, a different sacrifice was made to the Sasquatch. The victim would be placed near a forest clearing while the tribe played a primal song, and the Sasquatch would emerge from the trees to devour its prey. The first night, it ate the assistant. The next night, it ate the guide. And then, it became time for the sacrifice of Lord Blackwood himself. As Blackwood was presented for sacrifice, he accepted his fate. But instead of the Sasquatch, a legion of woodland animals emerged from the trees. Foxes, elks, raccoons, and more, themselves painted with tribal symbols. The animals seemed to be on Lord Blackwood's side, and attacked the tribespeople who had been holding him captive, giving Blackwood the chance to flee into the forest during the chaos.
We're in their corner and on it, because their local agent is a small business owner, too.
Why is advertising me in State Farm? My mom really works at the headquarters.
And present him with things his captors had stolen.
I'm on State Farm.
An elder fox also gave him a letter, proclaiming him a knight of their people now. He was allowed safe passage back to a nearby settlement, at which point he wrote to his financiers back in England, explaining the situation and asking for more money to perform further expeditions into the Tahoma region. The whole incident had only increased his thirst for adventure and exploration. Whether this tale is actually true, or just a bizarre colonial fantasy from the pathological mind of a telepathic sea slug, we may never know. But it doesn't make it any less interesting. To this day, Lord Blackwood continues to be a perplexing but fascinating anomaly. He may not be the most dangerous, and he may not be the most useful either, But there's no denying that perhaps we'd all like to see
What?
Can you...
spin a good yarn over a warm cup of tea. Welcome back, comrade. The case of SCP-2273, also known as Major Alexei Belatrov, has sparked your imagination, and you need to know more. But even if you're not familiar with the Major...
Oh, we're back to this thing.
All you need to know is that it's one of war, tragedy, and alternate dimensions. He first appeared in the town of Danner, Wisconsin on the 13th of October, 1989, during an unprecedented seismic event. When he was first discovered, the Foundation researchers assumed that he was an extraterrestrial being on account of his advanced organic exoskeleton. In a surprising move for such an imposing creature, Belatrov gave himself up to Foundation agents without a fight. Major Belatrov was then impounded in Foundation Containment Site 17, where he was interrogated thoroughly. Over a series of interviews, the Foundation ascertained that Belatrov came from an alternate timeline where Russia and the US are locked in the so-called war to end the world, thanks to advanced military technology given to them by SCP-1000. Belatrov had nearly escaped execution at the hands of American soldiers and appeared in our timeline. Now he is a prisoner of the advanced suit that formerly kept him alive. But his story isn't over. The last remnant of a Cold War turned hot has plenty left to teach us. Something that you need to understand about the SCP Foundation before we go any further is that it doesn't only exist in every nation across the globe. It also exists in every splinter reality across the multiverse. And these splinter realities offer a countless multitude of tales of different places, different people, and different times. Today's tale concerns Major Belatrov's future in a universe where the secrecy of the Foundation is broken, and the anomalous world needs to find a way to fit in with our own. The year was 2018. Like many humanoid anomalies that the Foundation was holding in this timeline, Belatrov was released from containment. He was no longer an SCP. He was now a mere person of interest, free to move around as he pleased. But this didn't
Wow,
mean
that's
Belatrov
rare.
was about to enjoy a quiet life on Easy Street. He was still an interdimensional refugee from a broken alternate
What?
world.
You got
Thankfully, there was a certain group willing to help, the Mana Charitable Foundation. This anomalous charity has been involved in a number of strange cases investigated by the Foundation before, and now they were going to lend a hand to Major Belatrov. Thanks to their anomaly reintegration project, Mana was able to transport Belatrov back to his home of Volgograd in Russia. There, he became something of a national celebrity, making headlines across the country, sitting down for interviews on every Russian talk show, and even being offered book deals. But as a former military man, Belatrov was eager to return to government life and run for a government position. However, this ambition didn't go very far. Belatrov was rejected by all the government bodies he applied to. Even Vladimir Putin wasn't eccentric enough to want an insectoid cyborg from another dimension in his cabinet.
That's great.
Belatrov endured a rough 2 years in Volgograd. He was treated more like a sideshow freak than a human being. People didn't want to rent apartments to him, and he was never able to find permanent employment. Even entry-level jobs rejected him. Nobody wanted to get food served to them by what looked to be a 7-foot monster, and he seemed equally ill-suited to help Russian women find the right perfume in department stores. In April of 2020, Belatrov had finally had enough. He contacted the Mana Charitable Foundation once again and asked to be relocated. They told him that some religious institutions in the area, including the Eastern Clockwork Orthodox Church, were accepting and housing anomalous refugees. Not long after this, Belatrov truly fell off of the SCP Foundation's radar. But one former Foundation operative was well aware of Major Belatrov's fate. It's 2021. Dr. Friedrich, the Site-17 anomaly psychologist who'd conducted all of the initial interviews with Belatrov all the way back in 1989, started receiving letters from him. There was no indication as to his true location, and they appeared to have been handled by a Manna Charitable Foundation mail carrier in Russia. But Dr. Friedrich was happy to hear from an old friend nonetheless. Due to a career of working near highly radioactive anomalies like Belatrov, Dr. Friedrich was suffering from terminal lymphoma. It seemed almost like an act of divine providence that Belatrov's letters would come to him so close to the end. The two began a correspondence, and it was only after Dr. Friedrich's eventual death that the letters came to the SCP Foundation's attention. It was from this final correspondence that the Foundation was able to answer the big question: whatever happened to Major Alexei Belatrov? In his first letter to Dr. Friedrich, Belatrov thanked him profusely. He knew that Dr. Friedrich had been a crucial part of him gaining freedom from the Foundation, and credited the therapeutic techniques taught to him by Dr. Friedrich with keeping him alive and sane to this day. Belatrov expressed a mix of amazement at this brave new world and a sense of profound weariness. As a man eternally locked into a weapon of war, he felt unsuited to a world in peacetime. He almost missed the scorched, irradiated Russia of his home dimension. But most of all, he missed Site-17. He missed Dr. Friedrich. He missed some of his fellow anomalies like SCP-507, the Teleporting Man, and SCP-163, the Spacecraft. He even missed the simplicity of being contained. He hoped that Dr. Friedrich would write back. In his second letter, Belatrov began detailing his experience with the Eastern Clockwork Orthodox Church. Despite growing up in a highly atheistic communist environment, Belatrov became enamored with the ways of the church. He found them to be highly accepting of him, in spite of his unfortunate circumstances. They displayed a freedom in their faith that Belatrov had never encountered before, and he was eager to be a part of it. With the help of Dr. Friedrich, Belatrov was also sending letters to some of his fellow freed anomalies. He signed off by saying that he had even started praying, something he'd never considered before. The next letter, sent in 2027, struck a much more somber tone. It was sent shortly after Belatrov discovered Dr. Friedrich's diagnosis. He wanted to return and see the doctor one more time, but the Manna Charitable Foundation wouldn't allow him to return to Site-17, believing he had been abused during his time there. Belatrov gave Frederick his prayers and well wishes, and asked for a number through which he could contact his ailing old friend. By the time the next letter arrived in 2034, Belatrov had become a fully fledged member of the Eastern Clockwork Orthodox Church. He referred to the other monks at the monastery as his brothers and sisters.
This is really wholesome.
Takes 5, you stay in your car because we're faster than you think.
Oil change is done.
Gosh, I don't even have time to stretch my legs.
Yes, you have to do.
He seemed to have finally found a true home there, and the others fondly referred to him by the nickname Father Anvil. But the true heart of the letter is Belatrov's deep concern for Dr. Friedrich's health. Notably in this letter, he often refers to Dr. Friedrich by his first name, Thomas, as though to emphasize the urgency of the message. After the deaths of several of the anomalies that Belatrov considered friends, he stated that he couldn't handle losing anyone else. His letter ends with a poignant passage. You may be unmarried, Dr. Friedrich, but you are not unloved. You have to be strong for me. You have to be strong for yourself. If you're ever worried that you cannot find the strength to continue, think of the garden you'll plant this spring. I'd like to share gardening photos with you again. Not many of my brothers and sisters here appreciate the simple beauty of a flower bed, or the effort that goes into growing a patch of vegetables. It's a beauty I'd like to continue to share. Trust in the power of modern medicine. God is smiling on you. Please, be strong. With love,
God, what a wholesome person.
This letter arrived on the 15th of February, 2034. Sadly, Dr. Friedrich had already passed away 4 days earlier. He never got to see Alexei's final letter, and it truly was his final letter. With nobody left for him in the world, Major Belatrov stopped sending any correspondence. What we know about the final years of Belatrov's life all comes from a few scattered journal entries, translated from Russian after his passing. They provide clues as to the kind of life he lived during the 29 years the Foundation could not account for his whereabouts and his actions. The first entry, written on January 7th, 2035, paints a grim picture of Belatrov feeling broken and isolated in the monastery. He wrote, "Today is the day that our monastery celebrates the birth of our Lord. However, I feel no desire to celebrate. All of my friends in this world are dead. My
brothers and sisters are partaking in some celebration outside my dormitory. All of the required ceremonies are complete. Neither they nor whatever is happening out there will lighten my mood. Belatrov also wrote about losing the comfort he once had in his faith, and his doubts about whether he would be able to recapture that comfort. But he had survived greater traumas than this, and he would continue to press on. As the months turned to years and the years turned to decades, Belatrov climbed through the ranks of the monastery. Seeing as the Eastern Clockwork Orthodox Church practically worshiped the concepts of industrialization and mechanization, the fact that Belatrov was permanently encased in a biomechanical exoskeleton probably made him seem even more pious to his holy brethren. The final piece of evidence collected by the Foundation into the life and times of Alexei Belatrov came just over 20 years later, in a final address written to comfort his followers in preparation for his own death.
Yeah, this tower's going pretty
Belatrov
good.
recounted the details of his own life, being born into a world of fire, death, and mushroom clouds. Then his life being suddenly saved by forces beyond his control, only to place him into containment for almost 30 years. It was only after accepting the teachings of the church and accepting the clockwork goddess that he felt he was truly free from his past. In this final note, Belatrov lay out some of the teachings of his new religion, the belief in a great mechanized goddess who planned all of reality. According to Belatrov, everything in her design fits together perfectly, like cogs in a machine, turning and twisting in unison to create an ideal world. He hoped to be forgiven for the many violent sins he committed in his military life, and that his contributions to this new world were valuable. At the very end of his address, Belatrov wrote, "I do not believe that my time in this world is much longer. Brothers and sisters, when my time of judgment comes, do not mourn me. I would rather you remember these words. The goddess is most pleased with those who seek kind, non-violent resolution to their problems. Because a machine whose gears grind against each other is a machine that cannot work. See truth, but also compassion. The words are only words. Seek out truth within them. God bless you all, Father and..."
God, like, YSPs are really like, oh, I wish he was actually real. Can you imagine if, like, you actually were able to talk to him?
Peacefully in his sleep from natural causes. He lived a warrior's life, but died a humble priest's death. The true tragedy in the strange life of Major Alexei Belatrov is how little choice he had in his circumstances. But thanks to this tale, we know he did what he could with the life he was given. His remains lay within the graveyard at the Eastern Clockwork Orthodoxy Monastery, where he spent the last years of his life. With a life as difficult as his own, we can only imagine he's glad to finally rest. Some of the anomalies the SCP Foundation deals with are dangerous, with the most powerful able to end all
4999.
in reality as we know it. Others pose no threat at all, and seem content to simply exist. Still others are something else entirely. SCP-4999 is a humanoid entity, though its appearance seems to fluctuate between manifestations, with the only unchanging detail being that it always is dressed in dark formal wear. Originally thought by many to be an urban legend, local tales of SCP-4999 are what initially tipped the Foundation off to its existence, and further research indicates that there are accounts that may be referring to the appearances of 4999 throughout recorded history. Strangest of all, though, is the consistency with which it appears, or rather the consistent situations and types of people it appears to. From the data available, it seems that SCP-4999 only appears to people in a very specific type of need, as you'll see in the case of a subject named Alex Hereford and the fateful night he experienced. The road was slippery, and Alex was driving too fast. He knew this, of course, but it's a different matter altogether to know a thing and to care about it. Rain hammered on the front windshield, the weak headlights of his 2005 Honda Civic barely punching into the thick, black night ahead of him. Winding through the mountainside, the road was mostly empty, save for the very occasional twin beams of light blazing past him due to his high speed. It was hard to hear the honking of angry horns over the heavy pounding of the rain. Then it happened. In a way, Alex knew it was inevitable. His tread-worn wheels finally lost contact with the ground, a thick layer of rainwater between them and asphalt betraying his speeding vehicle's grip on
Starts water
He had
planing
expected
or
fear,
hydroplaning.
but instead felt nothing really. A slight sense of anticipation, like wincing right before a punch lands in that childhood game of hitting each other on the arm. It wasn't that the world had slowed down, but perhaps his brain was simply working at a much greater velocity now, recognizing its own impending death. His speed of thought seemed magnified to the point of slowing his perception down. He heard of soldiers in war zones experiencing the same phenomenon, as they felt sure that in the next few seconds, they'd be dead. Alex wondered, would he smash into a tree, go off a cliff's edge? He could hardly see the forest or the terrain beyond in the thick rain and the dark of the mountain. Though he traveled this road a million times before, he had no idea where he actually was tonight. He supposed it wouldn't really matter, which it was. As usual, or rather, they had simply run their course and returned to the one place they always did. It wasn't like there were many other people to think about in Alex's mostly empty life. There was, and always had been, since the moment he'd met her. Mostly just her. But even Alex's heightened state of mind couldn't delay the inevitable for long. It would be a cliff after all, Alex thought curiously, catching a glimpse of town lights far away and below. The car spun 180 degrees out into empty air, then came crashing down with a horrible roar of shattered glass and tearing metal as it tumbled down the hillside. Even over the torrential downpour, the noise of Alex's crash was significant, had anyone been around to hear it. Finally, after over 100 feet down a steep incline, the car
God.
smashed into a single thick oak tree, bringing the disaster to an end. As if on cue, the rain began to let up, slowly at first, then all of a sudden in that peculiar way that northwest torrential downpours tend to do, as if the sky had at last finished emptying itself all at once. Inside the shattered vehicle, Alex was, incredibly, alive, at least for the time being. The airbag deployment had spared his face the worst of it, and the sturdy aluminum frame of the vehicle had given its all in protecting Alex's body from the downhill crash. But even postmodern vehicle engineering had its limits. His breath came in slow, ragged gasps, difficult at first, but gradually steady. Not an improvement in his condition, but rather his body dedicating the rapidly dwindling resources at its disposal into keeping vital functions going as long as possible. Opening his eyes, Alex was surprised to find himself right side up, less surprised to look down at the shattered mess his limbs and lower body had become.
Introducing
God, poor guy.
more power.
Isn't there like this one SCP that like comes out of actually like nowhere and like helps you or something? Just like a ghost, but it helps you.
Looking to his right, he could see the trunk of the tree that had stopped his out-of-control tumble. Despite himself, Alex laughed, a weak, gurgling chuckle. So, it was the cliff and a tree after all. He focused on breathing, letting the waves of pain wash over him, until his brain eventually canceled them out by injecting his broken body with adrenaline and chemicals. Everything was quiet and still after the crash and the rain, but to his surprise, he could hear something. It was faint at first, just a soft crunch of footsteps on gravel, but the sound grew louder and louder until at last, it came to a stop outside Alex's window. With every ounce of effort, Alex turned his head towards the sound. A rescuer? No, impossible. Nobody was up on this mountain, and nobody could possibly have reached him here so quickly, even if there had been. He supposed he should have been surprised. Yet almost from the moment that his eyes fell on the tall, handsome figure with the casual yet fashionably cut black suit, Alex accepted him for what he was. There was no shock, no confusion. For the second time tonight, just a calm sense of acceptance. The man, probably somewhere in his mid-30s, leaned down to peer in through the window. He said nothing as he casually observed the extent of Alex's injuries. Satisfied, he laid a hand on Alex's shoulder. The grip was firm, but not painfully so, just strong enough to communicate, "I'm here with you. Things will be all right." After a slight squeeze, the figure reached inside his jacket and produced a pack of cigarettes, packing the tobacco.
Oh, I've heard of this one. Yeah, and he lights a cig for you.
Alex nodded his head, a very small motion that exploded pain across his shattered body. "No, thank you, but that stuff will kill you." Alex smiled. The man paused for a moment, the ghost of a smile showing on his face for just a moment before disappearing. Returning the offered cigarette, the man took his own and lit it. giving Alex a good look at his face in the light of his cigarette lighter. Alex had been right. The man appeared to be somewhere in his mid to late 30s. Handsome, but not cover model, so just pleasing to the eyes. He sported short hair, carefully combed and perfectly neat, completely unaffected by the slight drizzle that still fell. The more Alex looked at him, the less he could remember about the man's exact features. It wasn't a good
What?
Do you have the extra portable charger?
What do you mean?
Like the little black bar portable charger?
Did you get his flashlight?
Uh-huh.
Huh? Did you get Race's flashlight?
Yeah, I did.
Hey, hold on. Where is it? I know. Give me a second. It's worth it. Do you have a mic?
Stream batteries.
Do you have a micro USB charger?
I don't know if I do or not.
I know it sucks, but you need to get a micro USB charger.
And no one has plugged in. Who keeps unplugging my shit? It's you. It's you.
Damn it.
You keep unplugging stuff to plug your laptop in. I will protect your flashlight.
The flashlight will last approximately 1 hour on 2,000 lumens, and it will last 2 hours or 6 hours on 1,300.
That's how do I know 1,000 hours? How do I know the small?
When you start it, it's going to be at 2,000. When you click it again, it's going to be at 1,300. Then when you click it for a third time, it will strobe.
Okay, so I want the second click.
Yeah.
Can you put these in your room out of my... Please.
And then when are you going?
We're leaving in about an hour. We're gonna stay there overnight.
To read.
At the Missouri State Penitentiary that's closed.
Your person?
No, he paid to stay.
Pay to stay, pay to stay, pay to stay. La, 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 la.
I'm not trusting the same.
Don't leave without a USB charger because the flashlight needs USB.
Well, I don't have one.
Well,
USB charger.
you micro USB. You know the shitty USB? Give me a second. Nope, that's not it.
The print's wrong, actually. We sang this once, and then she dubbed herself missing.
Kristen outside.
Yeah, and he was upset with Chip. I bet he's upset with Chip. Does she still go with you?
Can't find a micro USB. I'm sorry. Oh. Yeah, man. Wait. No, that's my calculator charger. That's my Nerf charger. That's my Disney Infinity toy. That's my camera cord. Where's my micro USB? I'm not surprised if I, like, got rid of it or, like, lost it. I don't use micro USB anymore. It's inferior. There's nothing I use micro USB for now. I rid of all my... oh, no, that's USB-C. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be rude to you, USB-C. Can't find the garbage. Found one.
Thank you.
May not be good. It'll take hours to charge. It takes like less than an hour for a normal core, but an hour plus for the charging. So
Look
if
at
I
her. Look at her.
you are well, if you like bite me, I get it. It's getting
It's getting better every day.
Oh god. Yeah, the flashlight's the only thing I charge. It's actually a really good flashlight. It's a 2000 lumen flashlight. Like quadruple the power of something this small. The Stanley Fat Max. I know it's weird to hear me flex about my flashlight, but like, it's a very good flashlight. Really good. I bought it because I was tired of buying those like $5 flashlights you find at gas stations. They'd like burn out in like a day. You never care about them, and you just toss them. So yeah, it illuminates my barn that is about 250 foot away, almost completely with the setting on. The only con of it is it charges using micro USB, has expensive batteries, and what's it called? It lasts like a short amount of time, but it gives a powerful amount of electricity out. It is rechargeable, but the way I recharge it is horrible. I'll be right back. I need to go back. So if I can take a break. I mean, to be honest, I'm doing pretty good so far.
Where you going? What's down there?
Yeah, sure. Don't you do it, Nugget. Aw, look, she's watching. Look. Aw. Look at her short little legs. But then her like body is so long.
What are you doing, Sky? What are you doing? Come here. Hi, you guy. Come here, Sky. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, sweetie. Aretha's $12 sneakers. I can't wear them. Funky. Did Lewis go last night? Yeah. Did they stay longer than you, or they barely cut the time? What did you say? Did they stay longer than you, or? Yeah. He'll watch about sometimes. You meet the person that owned it, I guess? Yeah, I went to Disney. Oh, who was it? I didn't. Really? Was it her mom and dad's kids?
four-legged friends. Hello, my four-legged friends. Hello. I'm my four-legged friend. You're so happy. You're so happy.
Is this empty?
Should be.
No.
I have returned to do something. Alright, it took me a while.
There's a Manic Monday by the Bangles. He wrote that too.
Hmm. I love this video. I'm sorry, it's really toxic, but it's funny.
Like, do not bully.
Do not, remember.
The fuck you say to me, you little shit? How are you not in fucking school? You kiss your mother with that mouth? That fucking mouth? Huh? Huh?
Why are you so curious?
Because the fucking youth is just.
You shut up, I'm talking to you! You shut your...
Do not make fun of anyone. Dude, what a lucky fuck stick, dude. All my shit was fucking unloaded. God damn it. Why? Dude, those fucking. That little piece of shit, they fucking rushed me because they knew who I was. 1,000,000%. No reason they leave out of town to kill a fucking solo, dude. No way. They're on the highest building, and they fucking go for one guy. They didn't go for the entire time, dude. Oh, man. What a bunch of fucking cucklords, man. I would have fucking destroyed that kid. You are a fucking loser.
God, he is toxic. God, I never liked Ninja. He's just kind of a show-off. Like, actually, nobody likes him. I don't... He's just damn toxic. I thought I was toxic until I saw him.
Sky, it's okay, sweetie. Come here, Sky. He's like, I don't have to finish this thing, are you, huh? Come here, sweetie. It's okay. He's like, really?
I like putting this stuff on my headphones. Now I can listen to it. Mm. I have to play this out loud. By the way, what's it called? I kind of wanted to go on like a little talk. You see this? About what I think is wrong with Just Cause 4. Do you know what I actually really do not like? Actually, hold on. By the way, hold on. I'm not hating on the Just Cause 4 comment music, but here's the comment music from Just Cause 4. I don't hate it, but then that's what you listen to when fighting the Black Hand on Just Cause 4. This is what you listen to Just Cause on Just Cause 3. There's a better remix to this theme. In fact, it's not like by another person, it's by the game. They remix some of their themes. Da 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 da. Bum, 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 bum. What's it called? In Just Cause 4, you could literally just whip out like a simple shotgun, and you can kill the weakest Black Hand member in like a single shot. In Just Cause 3, it takes like 3 consecutive shots, like even up to 2, and I think to the face, for you to kill a Black Hand soldier. But like on Just Cause 4, yeah, like Black Hand, if you get in trouble with them, yeah, sure, homie. I'm not kidding you. If you were having like 5 Black Hand soldiers shoot at you at the same time, it's scary. It's my favorite part of the team. Just go to my video called Black Hand War and you'll hear the music. Like, I'm not kidding you. Like, 20 of the same soldiers in Just Cause 3, like, all the privates will be shooting at you, and it's nothing. But when you get, like, all the Black Hand soldiers shooting at you, like, even up to 3 at a time, it's scary, because they do so much damage, and they have really good aim. And the scary thing about them is that they have better weapons, better armor, and everything. Like in Just Cause 3, Just Cause 3, every single Black Hand soldier was armored. There was 3 of them. There was the base soldier, there was the ghost, which literally was a really good make. Ghost soldiers were really good at dodging bullets. And then there were Titans that even if you had to like shoot 3 RPGs at a Titan in order to kill them, that's actually what the armor back here is mentioned. I actually got the inspiration of this armor from Fallout 4 and Just Cause 3's Titans. And here it is. Here's my armor. Oh my god, it's like 2 pounds. That's what she said. It took me like 12 hours to build this piece of armor. It's actually a really well crafted piece of cardboard armor for something I'd make.
Getting everything set up for you. Watch it come out.
I hate how people never knock before entering. They always barge in. Like, privacy? Question mark? Yeah, I'm streaming, but like, still. Just Cause 4, I'm gonna go on a small rant. Just Cause 4's world is awesome. Rivaling Medici. Medici's beautiful. Just Cause 3 and Just Cause 4's maps are just undoubtedly beautiful. In fact, Solis is kind of how I got inspiration for Abteria, because it's all jungle-like. In fact, it actually might influence this one, but I'm not going to copy Solis. I will put bases in there, like inspired from Just Cause 3. But other than that, yeah. I love the map. A little bit too big, but honestly, it's one of the most beautiful maps I've ever experienced. One thing I really like about Just Cause 4 is that how realistic things are. In Just Cause 4 or 3, they were like infrastructure. I know it's a really weird topic, like pick on, but like there's barely any power plants and there's barely any power lines. So you're like, oh, how does the power get anywhere? Like for example, the substations are actually not built correctly. It's not how they're built in real life. Like the wires connect to anything else, and it's like what? It's just invisible. But like, yeah, I know I'm not saying that dictates how good a game is, but Just Cause 4, the world feels so open because there's like, you actually see power lines in the world. You're like, oh, this is how the world functions, and it's not just like invisible power lines or whatever. And it's actually really cool, and I like that. And yeah, Just Cause 4 has a really fun thing with weather. The tornado is a more fun one. I've never really triggered any of the other ones except for the tornado, because obviously, why would I not trigger a tornado? Tornadoes are just fun. Anyway, the biggest problem with Just Cause 4, in my opinion, is the enemies, and it's the base liberation. In Just Cause 3, how you would liberate a base, you would go in there guns blazing. You want to bring a tank? Go ahead. Do you want to go no vehicles? Go ahead. You want to have a rocket launcher or a lightning gun or a freaking mini nuke launcher that's better than Fallout 4's Fat Man? Go ahead. Knock yourself out. You could raid a base by helicopter. You could raid a base by a tank. Hell, you could raid an air, like a land-based air, like a jet launcher. Let's say you can land an you could raid an aircraft base with an effing boat if you want to. You could just drop a boat in the middle of nowhere and raid a base. Although it not be like practical, if you wanted to do it, you had the freedom to do that. But in Just Cause, in Just Cause 3, you would just destroy every asset, annihilate everything. Towns were annoying, but bases were fun. Like, I like liberating all the base. Like, everybody would liberate Falco again, or some of the cave bases in northern, like, Striate. But in Just Cause 4, how you do it is that you literally guard a hacker who hacks a base or something. I don't even know what the hell he does. He hacks his something, and then poof, the base is completed because there's... Yeah, I'm pretty sure... Yeah, breaking news. The United States can't use their base anymore because it got hacked. They can't... Like, what's it called? All the barracks. Like, only the computers are destroyed, but we still can't use the entire base. Like, that doesn't make sense. And I love the enemy variation. There's invisible enemies. There's titans. They come back. I like all beautiful. I like them better in that game. I like all the guns better. They're so unique. I like them all. But the bad thing is that the special enemies are few and far between. Like the invisible enemies, I never see them. Not because they're invisible, because they're just rare. You never expect them to come out and fight you.